this clip that I found on People Magazine. So this is peoplemagazine.com, and it's all about Ali's unexpected 42-hour labor. And I feel like this will help segue into Ali being able to deep dive a little bit into some of that trauma and what might have sparked her interest into breath work. But I'm pretty sure that this experience must have helped jumpstart or at least push forward her want and need to dive into trauma work and whatnot. I will read some of this article, and I quote, it says, "Stripped, Ali Levine is opening up about her completely unexpected and 42-hour labor. On April 3rd, the celebrity stylist and her husband, Justin, welcomed their first child into the world, daughter Amelia, via C-section." And I quote, this quote was from Ali herself. "My birth experience was completely unexpected and crazier than I could have imagined. I've always heard you just can't control and you have to just let go. But to be in the thick of it and experience, that was something I'll never fully be able to articulate how I felt in the moment." End quote. "I had planned on a natural vaginal birth. I did not want any drugs, nor did I want to go to a hospital. I felt truly connected to my baby in a spiritual manner, and therefore I wanted a peaceful tub birth." Levine initially was at home for the first good portion of her labor with her husband and her doula by her side, keeping her comfortable. "She did different comfort measures to make sure I could handle the pain, walking, swaying, rotating my hips, using my birth ball. And I wanted to experience my birth truly and be one with the baby through the whole process. Then once I started the progress, we went to the birth center, and where my midwife continued to monitor me and have me pushing and laboring to get the baby down." Long story short, because I read the full article and I don't want to have to read the whole article to you guys out loud, it sounds like Ali had a very traumatic birth in the sense that she wanted to birth and labor at home. She did it for as long as she could, and probably for the safety of herself and her baby. They then sent her off to the hospital, and that, for whatever reason, resulted in a emergency C-section. Ali, I know this is going to be probably difficult to bring back to the depths of doom and share this story. I understand how traumatic it is or can be, but please try to give us some of that backstory. What happened? How were you feeling in the moment? And how are you feeling now?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for reading that. I haven't read it in years. Yeah. Okay. So you spoke about how I always wanted a, natural birth. I always felt very connected in the water. I wanted to have a natural birth at the birth center. And when I got pregnant with Amelia, like I said, after filming the show and everything that had happened and everything that had played out, I really knew that like my grandmother, who was on the other side at that point, had sent her to me. Because when we would talk about on Earth's side about me getting one day, if I ever had a kid, it would be a girl. And at that point, she was still around when I got married to Justin. So she had hope, that she knew one day I was going to have a child. She was like, he wants children. He wants a family. Like one day you're going to have that. And I was like, we'll see. And she's like, I know you will. When we would talk about it, I'd say, well, if I do, she's going to be named after you. Her name's going to be Amelia. So I knew before I even knew I was having a girl, or before I even saw that, that pregnancy line, and was so excited to know I was pregnant. I knew it was a girl the minute I saw that line, like knew so deeply that I had to actually call Justin from doing a TV segment in Vegas. I didn't wait to drive home because I was like shaking. I was so excited that I was pregnant at that time with her, and that, I knew in my heart it was a girl, even though we didn't find out till months later. I'm bringing that up because that was why I wanted the birth I wanted, because to me, I knew that connection and I had felt her so deeply and so connected that I didn't want to sever that connection by bringing different interventions and things that I had kind of done my research about and read. It was really important to me to keep things as peaceful as possible. So I honestly kind of kidded myself. I had no idea what to expect with my first birth. Kind of went in ego, to be honest, of like, oh, well, everyone has a baby. So like, I'll just have my baby, have labor at home, go to the birth center and have my baby and come home. I even packed my bag that had like a dress and like a whole cute like thing to go home in, because I really just thought it was going to just be have my baby and go home. No big deal. Little backstory. Amelia was quote unquote late to be born. Only a few days late. She was due March 30th. She was born on April 3rd, as you shared from the People magazine. And I had a lot of pressure around me. A lot of people saying like, how come she hasn't come yet? Your due date's passed. And I was a brand new mom. What did I know? And I was just freaking out and I was feeling so pressured. So I took castor oil. I probably took too much, to be quite honest. Castor oil is one of those things where some people can talk about really great things that come from it, and it can help moving along the birth when it needs to. For me, I think thinking back now and reflecting and learning where I'm at now in my journey, I think I took too much and I think my body couldn't handle it. And that actually started false labor at home and why things got so intense and why there was a lot of things that kind of played out. And then fast forward, we went to, as I said, my birth center. I was laboring with her and she wasn't progressing. She wasn't coming down. And I was in the tub and my midwife was like, are you feeling any pressure? Like what's going on? And I was feeling nothing. And I was just like, I don't know. I mean, I'm feeling like something, but I'm not feeling like pressure. They want me to feel pressure of her, coming down. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And I guess my midwife at that point stepped out of the room with my husband and just told Justin like, hey, we're not feeling comfortable with where she's at and what's going on. Now, a little backstory. My parents were there. They were very nervous and worried about my decision and what was going on. I'm their only daughter. A lot going on. There was a lot of outside noise. There was a lot of people. There was a lot of opinions. I decided to drive over to the hospital and, got to the hospital. They checked me in and, they were like, okay, we could see she's coming, but she's not progressing down. So let's put you on Pitocin and get you going. Well, they put me on like the highest, I think it was like a 10 or 15, whatever the highest level is. And I could not handle it. I went from being completely natural, using my body to move through these waves and surges that were going on to bright lights, fluorescence, people everywhere, belt hooked up on me, everything, talk about disconnected, just chaos, along with now this pumping me up and me throwing up every 2 seconds because I'm like, whoa, I'm like rejecting everything. So then that led into an epidural. And then when they put the epidural in, I said to her, I'm like, I don't feel connected to my body anymore. And I remember the nurse looking at me like I was kind of crazy. And she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, I don't know. And I don't know if I fully understood back then, Brittany, but now I do. Like that was a severed to me, like spiritual connection. Like I was no longer feeling her and I was no longer feeling like this spiritual connection to my birth and my body, if that makes sense. And it was just feeling so artificial and I felt so sick and I felt awful. Anyways, this went on for hours. As you mentioned, it was 30 plus hours at the birth center. And then we transferred to the hospital. And it wasn't until about almost 10 and a half hours later where finally it was time to push and try to make things happen. And they could see she was progressing. So they were like, okay, we're going to push. We're going to give this a shot. I pushed and pushed. I want to say she came down 2 or 3 times, I think it was. And as she came down, she just kept shooting back up. The doctor even tried to grab her and she just shot back up. And he was just like, look, I don't know what's going on. This is not happening. Like we're going to have to. Luckily, it was not an emergency because technically they were still giving me time to continue to try and to see if this was going to happen. But it was getting to a place where I was completely exhausted, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, like just exhausted. This was at almost 42 hours. My husband was exhausted. My family was, everybody was exhausted. My husband and I sat alone together and he said, what do you want to do? And I just started hysterical crying. And I just said, I just want to meet her. And he was like, I'm not going to push you to do anything you don't want to do. Like, I know how much you wanted a different birth. I just wanted to meet my baby. And so then it was like, okay, we're going to, go into a C-section. They rolled me back. I just remember in that moment, I was really scared. Obviously, I had to wait a minute for Justin to come in because he had to obviously scrub up and everything. Comes over and grabs my hand and he's, and I see him with the camera and he's like, oh, this is the before, as I'm laying there. And next thing I know, it was pretty quick and, she was out, she had just gotten stuck. Obviously, I was just grateful to have her. But during that whole process, I think the hardest part, besides the letting go of your birth plan, was like just feeling that disconnection, like just really feeling like I was so disconnected from my body and my spirit and everything I'd felt during my pregnancy. My pregnancy had felt so spiritual. Like I said, my grandmother, like I had gotten signs from her. I'd gotten dreams. I'd had so many messages and it just felt like I went from one place of like this like heaven bliss to just complete darkness. And when they rolled me over into the postpartum room when I had her, I was staring at her in disbelief and I was so happy and grateful. But there was a part of me, I remember in that moment, that was like dying. Like I was just so upset about everything that had happened. And I felt so much trauma in my physical body. And now I've learned, now being a breathwork facilitator and trauma informed, my trauma was actually starting to come up. And I didn't realize, like, from things I'd been through before even, getting pregnant. And it was all coming through from that traumatic birth, because what happened with trauma is once we go through something traumatic, that's what triggers, the event. Usually most people hold it until they actually have something happen in their lives that forces it to come up and it's no longer sitting in the body. And now it's come to the forefront. That's kind of what happened with me right away. It was just like, I immediately felt like I didn't know who I was and what was happening. And I just felt so disconnected. And even though I was so happy to hold her and I was happy to be her mom, in that moment, I just remember being like, what is happening? Like, who am I? Like, it was such a weird moment for me. And I still don't even know how to fully explain it, because it was like, there was a part of me that was so overjoyed and so thrilled to be a new mom and to have her. And then there was a part of me that was literally just sitting there like, what just happened? When I was home and I couldn't get out of bed, and the actual recovery and everything, I didn't get out of bed for almost 3 weeks. I could barely get up to help change her. She barely would latch. And so everything was so hard. Everything I thought that I was going to be able to do as a new mom, like Justin was doing. Like, he was going to the bed and changing her, and then he'd bring her over me and like literally put her on me to help me nurse. And then we were like humping because she like wasn't latching, and then we were using syringes, pull out the milk to then feed her. It was so much chaos, and nothing was obviously what I thought it was going to be. And it just went from like bad to worse. And then the next thing I know, I'm in full spin out and I'm being told I have postpartum depression and anxiety.
I'm honestly speechless, because take a few steps back and kind of rewind to when you said that you just thought, right? Like, I'm going to pack this bag. I'm going to look pretty. I'm going to come home with my baby. And I say that jokingly and kind of like laugh about it, only because, Ali, I had those same exact thoughts, girl. I was very naive. I had no idea that when I was going into my 32-week OB appointment that they were going to tell me that my baby's heart had stopped and now I'm going to go to the hospital and deliver my baby sleeping. I just thought going into an OB appointment, I'm fine. They've been telling me I'm doing good for the last 8 months. Now I'm going to deliver this beautiful baby in a couple weeks to a month or two. And I'm going to be learning how to breastfeed. And I get to be a mom around Christmas and Thanksgiving. And yay, it's all going to be puppies and ponies. Little did both of us know, and I'm sure most moms that are tuning into this right now that have given birth are now starting to see that birth is not like what you see, and no pun intended, in the Hollywood movies.
Not at all.
There is a lot to it. There is a lot of risk involved from start to finish. There is a lot that happens. And me hearing that story of you talking about your daughter, it almost made me want to cry, because the whole time I'm thinking, and I think that I'm a little bit jaded and I think differently now because I did lose my son to stillbirth. I'm grateful that you did not lose your daughter to stillbirth because of what happened. So many things went wrong, but a lot of things went right, and you have your daughter.
Yes.
But we naively, as kids and even into an early adulthood, like, we don't know how many things can happen during pregnancy, post-pregnancy, while giving labor and delivery. What has this situation taught you? And I know you mentioned a little bit of your ego dying from it. And then how do you look at life differently currently due to that trauma?
I think, what did I learn? Gosh, I learned so much. Well, first off, I learned that our body holds so much trauma. And when we don't deal with trauma before going through pregnancy, a birth, or, something major to do with our body holds, our body shutdowns. I actually believe a lot of her holding and not coming through was because I had so much trauma in my body that I hadn't dealt with. That muscle, was holding it and was holding her. And especially when we talk about our nervous system, the more we are in that fight, flight, or freeze state, the more our body will send signals to the baby to say, no go, don't come through, because the body is receiving that intensity. As I've learned as a facilitator of what it looks like when someone is in that state and how to help them move out of it, I think I've learned, well, one, to have awareness of what is going on with myself and how to move myself through it. Two, to always express my emotions, even if I don't want to allow myself to have a safe space to do so, and to know that vulnerability is a strength and it's not a weakness, regardless of what society says, and that we are meant to share to help others. We are meant to share to also be the medicine for each other. Healing comes from, like I said, from feeling. Even as hard as things are, there are blessings in disguise. I really do believe that we are supported, as I said, through, God and our angels and the universe and all that is around us. I really do believe that there is a higher power that, supports all of that. When you start to see that, and even the hardest things, there are blessings in disguise. It's all for our growth. It's all for those challenges to help us to be, actually, I believe, the best and highest version of ourselves and who we are meant to be as souls. And that we go through these experiences to be able to shed those darker parts of us, to shed the trauma that we had, to move into the highest light so we can show up that way, especially as mothers. Continue to learn to have those reflections, always express my emotions, and to remind myself like that I'm not alone on this journey, and that I'm also not in control. I think that was a really big piece to it too, was like, I should have let go of control, a long while back, but I had everybody else trying to control me, telling me, who to have as a doctor, what to do for my birth, what not to do, that it was almost like this rebellion of like, no, I'm going to do what I want to do and I'm going to control it, so much so that now I'm actually in resistance, which is not healthy at all. I should have allowed and been more of a surrender for my body that felt safe, and to actually have moved through what I had gone through, regardless of how it would have played out.
And again, thank you for sharing all that and being very real, raw, and vulnerable with not only myself, but with my listeners. You guys are now listening to Ali Levine, and we are talking all things mental health, breath work, her traumatic birth experience with her daughter, Amelia. I have fully enjoyed having you on this podcast. As we start to segue into breath work, because I know that we have been itching to learn all about it, I want to say thank you for, again, opening up about everything thus far. And I myself am very intrigued about breath work, and I'm sure my listeners are as well. I know that I shared this quote by you in part 1 from the Medium magazine article, but I want to share it again because I do feel it is so powerful, and I feel like it's a beautiful way to segue into you talking about breath work and kind of wrapping up us discussing the trauma of birth and healing and some of the other facets that you have been continuing to heal from your childhood and past relationships and whatnot. And I quote, this is directly from Ali: "In my journey, I've realized that the deeper I breathe, the more I can receive. Deep breathing quiets the mind, limiting beliefs, and that our ever active monkey mind. The ego, which can often lead us astray, also calms down." It's interesting because science now shows that as we intake more oxygen, neurons in our brain begin to shut off within minutes. This doesn't only allow us to breathe without constantly hearing our thoughts, but it also helps shift our state of consciousness, similar to the tranquility achieved during meditation. People often say they experience enlightenment during these moments. It's like moving from a basic consciousness to the higher states of delta, theta, gamma waves because of the quieted mind. To me, deep breathing connects us to the true essence of ourselves. We transition from merely regulating our body's nervous system to engaging with the realness of who we are, which I firmly believe is our soul. It's our true self. Strip away the limiting beliefs, the ego, and all of our worldly concerns, and what remains is our soul. Our soul is our true identity. When we can breathe deeply and tune into our own intuition and the wisdom of the Creator, a whole new world opens up. This has been evident in every facet of my life, be it personal, marital, or professional, and in my interactions with clients, children, and everyone around me. And Ali, I wanted to share that again. And I know I talked about it in episode 1 and 2 and everything that we have been speaking about. I needed to mention that again because I feel like it is such a powerful statement. Tell us about your journey into breath work. How is it learning to heal this way? And I want to learn more about helping out the nervous system.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. Yes, I'm obviously super passionate about this. I mean, that's how we connected, because I saw you sharing your story, and I, had commented, just sending you healing and asking if you had, tried breath work. And little backstory. So going into the postpartum depression anxiety journey that started shortly after having Amelia, my first, like I said, I was in a very dark place and I had no idea who I was and I had no idea how to get out. Not only was I in a dark place, but my body was completely inflamed. The body continued to inflame over the months when I was supposed to be healing according to the medical system. Everything was going the opposite. I had cystic acne going on. It was wild. Everything was like totally, extreme, and nothing like what, was supposed to be happening in this quote unquote healing from after having my child. And I started getting really curious about why that was going on, and was also grateful that as I was going through this journey, I reached out to her and I said, I don't know what's going on with me. I was diagnosed with postpartum depression and anxiety. I don't know what to do. And to be honest, I was offered at the doctor's office to take Lexapro, and look, to each his own. And I say this with love. I personally am not a fan of big pharma. I don't feel it actually solves. I know it's needed for some and it can work and then people get off of it. But I've just seen, even in my own life with grief, when I was put on Xanax and they tried to zone me out when my grandmother passed away, and I never ever healed. And I just masked, covered, and pretended. And I feel that's what happens with these pills. And so again, there's no judgment. But for me, when I was sitting there and I was offered to take it, I just remember sitting there and hearing my soul. It was almost like, one was on one shoulder and the other was on the other shoulder, like ego versus soul. And it was like, you can take this and get right back to your normal life, get back to the old alley, get back to the grind. It'll all be good and you'll be a new mom. And the other side of me was like, nope, don't do it. You've been here before. Like, do not mask, do not hide. You've come too far in your journey. Like, do not. I'm crazy, but I'm going to say no. And I just remember my doctor looking at me and literally saying to me that I can't help you. I don't know how to help you. And walking out of that office, hysterical, crying and feeling so lost and so alone. And so fast forward to my midwife, she was able to put me in front of a natural postpartum specialist. And they hooked me up also with a therapist who did more like cognitive therapy and talk therapy. All that to be said, because I went on a very holistic path, and they introduced me to deep meditations, deep breathing, started learning how with cognitive therapy and different words that you say to yourself, how to kind of reverse engineer how you speak, and using positive words and affirmation, journaling every day, and all these different practices to start to move me into a healing place. Now, obviously this wasn't overnight, but over time, I started to notice things as simple as like the birds were chirping, or I would wake up and not have messed up thoughts, or I'd wake up and actually be grateful that I was waking up, or I wanted to get dressed that day. And now you're talking to someone who was a stylist for so many years, who loved to get dressed and get glam and get pretty. Like I know we talked about in part 1. And I was at a place, Brittany, where it was like, I could barely even, get a bra on to nurse. It was like, I don't want to show up. I don't want to be seen. I just want to hide out. And so being able to wake up and start to want to get dressed and put together a cute wardrobe and enjoy my day and make a phone call and catch up with someone and see what was happening, started seeing switches in my life. I also actually got off social media for many months because my therapist told me that I needed to, that it was adding to everything that I was going through. And I was comparing myself to new moms who had it all together. And I was, in the highlight reels, if you will, of mothers and their motherhood journey. And it was just crushing me. And so they, recommended that I, took some time off, which I was pretty much doing content creation then. So that was a really hard decision, but it was kind of like health is wealth, right? So I had to make that decision. And so fast forward, I do all these different practices and I'm journaling. I remember my journal every day. I would write down like, I'm grateful to meditate. I'm grateful, for this. I'm grateful for that. And even though I hated honestly meditating at the time, they were teaching me to use positive words and kind of changing my brain, because the more we teach our brain something different, the more that has to rewire into something new. Well, now this is where then breath work got really powerful. So as I started learning deep breathing and how bringing more oxygen, as you mentioned, into the body actually shuts off the neurons in the back of our brain, the neuroreceptors and the neurons in the back of our brain, that allows those noises and those thoughts and all the wildness that's kind of going on, the chaos in the monkey mind, to actually shut off. And so the more I started doing that deep breathing, the more I was able to actually get out of the spinning and the chaos that I was in. And actually, it wasn't until 2020, where of course COVID and everything happened in the world, and I was pregnant with my second daughter, Ali. That's where breathwork actually, to be honest, became really profound, because I was finally in a more healed place since having Amelia. I finally found the light at the end of the tunnel, basically around when she turned 1 year old. I started to turn a corner. I got super dressed up for her birthday and we had a big party, and it was like, covered by E and whatever. And, it was like, I felt like I was finally getting things back together in my life, and I was celebrating that I was feeling good. And it was my first year of motherhood and I had survived in so many different ways, and she was well and everything was good. Came being pregnant with Arlie, in 2020, and everything that I had been doing as my practices, everything that had been working for me stopped working. And honestly, I felt like I was spinning backwards on like, I don't know, 100 times faster. Like it was like rewind. Like I was like, what is happening right now? how could this be happening? Like, I've come to such a good place. And that was when I started really diving into breath work on a deeper level, because I had facilitators around me who said, I know you were doing some deep breathing, but were you actually doing the trauma release? I know you were meditating, but like, was everything in the mind, or did you actually move it out of the body? And I was like, what are you talking about? And when I started actually studying, I read a book called The Body Keeps Score. It's a really, really good book. And also The Breath by James Nestor, both really fantastic books. You want to kind of dive in, and really talked about how our body holds everything. And when I started to understand how much my body was holding, and I wasn't actually processing, and I was just telling my mind I was processing, I started to understand that I had more trauma that I needed to release in the body, and that there was more going on, especially because I was pregnant. It was all coming basically back up and bubbling up. And then you add in COVID and everything happening that was, triggering my nervous system. So it was essential for me to not only regulate my nervous system, but also like retrain my nervous system to feel safe. So every day I started doing deep sessions for like half hour to an hour to start to really regulate and retrain, and then also start to shift the consciousness. And now this is where the healing work gets really powerful, because as we start to shift consciousness by just breathing, and we're in this state and we're being guided in meditation, however, maybe with facilitator, you start to release what you're holding, and you're not doing anything. You're just being held in a safe space, online or in person. I was online, being held in a safe space where you can just allow the body to release, because the body knows what it's holding. It's your mind that's telling you over and over again, the ego, that like you're healed, everything's fine, or you're a mess, or whatever it is. But the body actually knows. I tell all my clients, your nervous system does not lie. It knows exactly what you need. So when you are doing that deep breathing, you might start hysterical laughing. You might start getting super angry. You might get super emotional. You might get super tired. Whatever it is, the body is moving it out and through. And the more you stay in that state and continue to come back to that breathing, the more the body will continue to compound and move it through. And then as things come up to the surface, then you can talk about them, then you can feel them further and heal them and shift it. And as I say, shift the narrative, shift the story, shift your life, and you start to change what's actually going on. And this is where it all started to really get powerful for me, where everything that was being told to me to be fearful, in 2020 with, Arlie wanting to have a VBAC, vaginal birth after a C-section, wasn't going to be allowed to have my husband there because California took partners away. All these things that were not in my control were originally spinning me out. But then breath work started to ground me again. And I was able to start getting out of my mind completely. And then when I would do meditation, it was way more guided and deeper seated to be like, okay, I am safe. I'm going to do the inner work, because the inner work is going to create the outer shifts. And the more, I swear, I still don't know how to explain it to this day, but the more I did the inner work, the more that, like, every time I was told something at the doctor's office, like I was like, I go home, I do the deep breathing, I would do some praying, I would believe, I would trust. And then the next time I'd see them, they'd be like, everything's good. You're good. We can keep waiting. And the reason I was waiting is I wanted my husband to be in the hospital with me. I did not want to birth alone. And by the way, any mother who births alone during that time, I have so much love and beyond respect for you, and also like so much healing space to hold for you, because I can't imagine. I was so grateful that my daughter Arlie, actually everything was good and healthy. They let me go to 42 weeks, right on the nose. And she came right at 42 weeks, and I went into labor and everything was natural. And they switched the rules the week before in California that my husband could be there. And so he was able to go with me, and I was able to have him. And that was such a gift to have him there and be with me. And then fast forward, I'm having her at the hospital. And, it was chaos, obviously, because it was COVID times. And I just kept doing my deep breathing, and I kept regulating my nervous system. And I kept telling myself everything was going to be okay and everything was going to be peaceful. And the more I believed it and felt it and received it in my body, the more I changed the thoughts of what was going on. So much so that at the very end, she got stuck in the same way Amelia did. And I share that not for fear, but because my body still was holding some trauma. Even though I had done so much trauma work, my body was still holding some trauma. And instead of getting in that fight, flight, or freeze of that, sympathetic nervous system where we get tight and tense, I started doing deep breathing. I asked my husband for my earpod to listen to one of my fear releasing playlists to get into my zone. And the only way I can explain it to this day is I had an out of body experience while I was doing this, and I was doing my deep breathing, and I saw myself above my body, watching myself give birth, even though I was above, and I could feel like I was in a heavenly realm, is how I would describe it. It was like pink and purple and golden light. It was beautiful. And I knew what I was doing, but somehow I was above my body, and I was just breathing and watching myself just be peaceful and sending myself peace. And next thing I knew, I heard my doctor say, okay, are you ready? We're going to push. And then I was back in my body. And next thing I know, I'm pushing and Arlie is on my chest. And I had my vaginal birth, 9 pounds, 3 ounces, complete shock, disbelief. I was hysterical, crying, mouth wide open. My husband's mouth was wide open. We were all in shock. Like, there she was. And that was the moment. I already knew how powerful breathwork was, but that was the moment. Not only did I see the power of us as souls and who we truly, I believe, are when you connect mind, body, spirit, but the power of our breath and what breath work does for us when we allow the body to regulate and actually move into that homeostasis, which is, by the way, we were born as babies. We breathe into the belly, into the chest, and out. And then we all stop doing that and we shallow breathe in our lives because that's how we're, taught to be and how we're taught to operate. But we're not meant to be that way. When we are in homeostasis, we thrive in all areas of our life and we make decisions in the most highest path and the highest way. And I've continued to see that for myself and all of my clients. And that is why I got certified, because after that happened, I was like, I know what I want to do with my, next career. My husband was like, what? I'm like, I'm going to become a breathwork facilitator. Like, this is soul transformation. I went into fashion because I love transforming people's lives through their wardrobe. This is literally the next level of transformation. And so that's how I got into breathwork full throttle.
Honestly, that story could not be more beautiful from start to finish. I really enjoyed how you talked about at the pinnacle of your first doctor essentially saying to you, I cannot help you. And you walked out and you were bawling your eyes out and you got sent over to more of a holistic approach. And I wanted to pinpoint and talk about that a little bit more because I myself am not by any stretch against Western medicine. And I'm sure Ali isn't either, where we believe in Western medicine and the traditional doctors because we need doctors, we need ER people, we need certain medications and whatnot. However, I 100% agree with Ali because I myself practice a lot of these things, not the breath work, which she's going to teach us shortly, but taking different herbs and supplements and sitting out in the sunshine and grounding and going for walks and reading a good healthy book and disconnecting sometimes from social media, sitting in the bathtub with a candle lit and trying to shift your state of consciousness to become more aware of your quieted mind. All of those things I resonate with tenfold, and I have been trying to do that for the last 7, 8, 9 years. And what I love about this type of healing journey is it's always evolving. And I know I use that word a lot, but it's truthfully so that it's a very progressive process in the sense that I don't think it ever ends. Like, there is no ending to healing.
Peeling back the layers of the onion is what I tell everyone. It's like you get through one layer and you're like, oh, that's good. Oh, wait, here's another layer.
It's true. You are able to become vulnerable with yourself and open up. It connects you with people like Ali. For example, I waited 6 weeks to post anything on my social media about my loss. And one reason was I was numb to the fact that I had lost my son. And truthfully, I was terrified of what other people's reactions would be. At the time, I hadn't even told a lot of my family members because I was still processing the loss and being numb. And to this day, 4 months later, I'm still processing and I feel numb. I felt such a sense of relief after posting online, even though I was terrified to do so because I felt like a weight was lifted. And it makes me sad and I want to cry, but I felt like me losing my son, there has to be some type of a silver lining out there. And if that silver lining is me teaching people about grief and therapy and having people on here like Ali, then I'm doing my job. And hopefully my son comes back in a rebirth and maybe his soul will be in one of my next
100%,
children
100%.
because I believe in that as well. There is always a silver lining. And I think Ali is kind of talking about that too, where the silver lining for her, it sounds like through all that trauma, and through the doctor saying, no, I can't treat you or help you, it sent her on this holistic spiral in a good way. And now she's able to rewire her brain and help rewire other people's brains. And with that being said, let's talk about rewiring the brain and slowing down the heart rate. Can you give us a little bit more information on these topics?
Yeah, absolutely. We've now seen over 100 years or so of science of studying how when you bring more oxygen into the body and you are breathing into the belly and into the chest and out and continuing different exercises, that you do start to not only shut off, like we spoke about, the neuroreceptors in the back of your brain, but you start to actually be able to start to fire and rewire and basically sever old wires, because the more you continue to breathe and bring in good thoughts. So say when I sit with my clients, I'm doing breathing exercises, I'll say to them, okay, we're breathing in joy, we're breathing in peace, we're breathing in trust, we're breathing in faith, we're bringing in safety, whatever it is they're looking for. We go into what they need, or I will help guide them. And we breathe into that, and they hold that emotion as they're breathing in their body naturally, but they hold it. And I have them hold it at one point for over 90 seconds, because this is something that most people don't know. Our emotions are meant to be experienced for 90 seconds, and that's it. And we as humans, myself included, especially the lower emotions, right? The lower vibrations, the fear, the panic, the anxiety, all that, we hold it for so much longer. That's why it stores in the body. That's why it can become, I believe, disease in the body, because it's a disconnection in the body. And so the more we allow ourselves to just go through the experience of our emotions, because our emotions are energy in motion. Everything is energy. And so if we allow that to flow the way our breath is meant to flow, well, then we get to start to actually rewire what's going on. And those wirings of you hearing, you're not enough, or, this is your fault, or these limiting beliefs, whatever it is, go away, because you're setting the intention and you're literally breathing into and changing what the neuroreceptors are doing. And the firing, rewiring happens, and then new wires fire and wire. And then guess what? The thoughts change. And the more you do it, the more you'll actually see that they've changed and they're gone. And then the next time something comes up, you do the same thing over and over again. It becomes a practice, and you start to be able to catch yourself. And what I've learned in my journey, Brittany, is like I've become an observer of my life. Someone who used to react to everything and respond to everything is now, I'm like, oh, I don't need to respond to that. I don't need to actually say that's not right, or I don't agree with that, or, this is the way I feel. It's like, yes, you communicate your feelings, but you don't have to respond to every single thing. It's actually healthier to be an observer of your life. And so I have learned how to observe most things that go on, and that I don't have to have a reaction. Most of us react because we're triggered about something, but we don't actually need to be triggered. We can just sit with it and receive it, and then decide, does it actually need a call for a response, or is this something I can handle internally and move through and process, and then move on to the next thing? And I don't even actually have to say anything to anybody. And then you decide where in your life, where that person stands, or relationship, or whatever it may be. It changes the way you operate in the best way possible. And it gives you way more inner peace. It gives you way more awareness, and it continues to shift your consciousness. And this is how, you speaking about evolution, I believe this is really where we're going as a collective, is this evolution in consciousness, is understanding that we are way more than just this human that's here in front of us, and that we are souls, and we're meant to actually connect back to that and come back to our spirit and understand this is the inner wisdom. This is the inner guidance. Gut health now is being studied so much. The gut is actually your second brain, and it's more powerful than your actual brain. So going on with your gut that could have to do with emotions, and that may have to be healed. And so the more we go on this holistic path and start to understand how important it is for the harmony of our body, of the mind, body, spirit, and that we don't sever it and cut one off from the other, the more we're going to be in flow and actually use tools like this to thrive.
Does one need to see a specialist like yourself for this all of the time? Or if somebody is more introverted and if they want to start to practice breath work or meditation themselves, can they start to do it on their own? And if so, what are some techniques? And if you suggest going to see a specialist like yourself, how would one get in touch with a breathwork coach?
Yeah, good questions. One, I would just say, obviously I always have to say never medical advice. Decide for yourself. But one would be, first off, yes, you can do it on your own. I would recommend having a facilitator, because I think especially as you start to get deeper into the trauma workings and you start to release more in the body, you need someone that can hold that safe space for you and guide you through, and also let you know, like, it's totally normal what you're experiencing. Sometimes people will get more lightheaded from deep breathing. Sometimes people will have a lot of tingling, which is known as tetany, that happens in the fingers. It's just energy wanting to move through the body and to be released of the emotions that you've been holding. But that can be overwhelming for some people. So having someone to guide you and to hold a safe space, whether it be online or in person. For me personally, I enjoyed the online sessions when I was going through it and having facilitation. And then of course now I do online and in person, depending on what, someone needs. I also have my own app for those that do want to do the journey on their own. That is why I created my app called Breathe and Be, because I wanted people to have that opportunity if they are more introverted, if they're just wanting to start the journey, they're not sure, they want to check it out, to have a place to go that's a resource that would hopefully help them, or at least start to make them curious in this journey of what this could do for them and how healing it can be. So it's just breathe, and then A-and-D, and the letter B, because it's all about breathing and coming back to the being of you as a soul. It's on App Store and on Google Play. And I put like different meditations on there, as well as a bunch of different breathwork exercises and affirmations. And I'm consistently dropping in new tracks and new material every month to support the community in there, so that they're always getting, new intentions to go to. And depending on where they are in their journey or their season, it's a resource for them. But I would say if you're really wanting to heal, I believe a facilitator is the right way to go. And of course, you can reach out to me. I'd be honored to work with any of you, or, you can just, honestly search online breathwork, and it's become very trendy, to be honest. So just be very aware and intentional of who you work with, and make sure they're trauma informed. That's really, really important. I've actually had a lot of clients come to me that were unfortunately traumatized by someone who just wasn't holding safe space, and I had to work with them to retrain their nervous system and help them feel safe about breath work and what we were doing, because this is a healing journey. So you need to make sure that you trust the person, and then they're going to hold safe space for you and guide you in this. I think it's really important, you find that soul alignment when it comes to this type of work.
And in your opinion, obviously I know that it's subjective, right, and individual to each person and everybody's circumstance, but how long does it take for a technique like this to at least start to be effective?
Yeah, it's a good question. So to be honest, and like, I kind of hate sharing this because it's not the case for most people, but my first session I did years ago was my hugest breakthrough. Like, my body just happened to really release. And I remember after that hour, like, I was bawling my eyes out, but then the next day I was like, oh my God, I feel like I literally, like how you posted and you felt like the weight had been lifted off your world. Like, that was me. It was like, oh my gosh, why didn't I do this sooner? And then from there, everything just kept shifting in the most beautiful way. And it was like, wow, I'm getting lighter and lighter. Now, not everybody has that. Some people will say they have better sleep for the first few months, and then they start to release more anxiety and more stress. Some people will say after 2 or 3 sessions with me, they start to really notice. I have had clients who have told me one session and they're feeling better, and then they'll come back a few months later and they want to continue, because they want to continue to peel back the layers and figure out how to get in a place of feeling that much better. I think everybody's different. It also depends on the trauma gone through and how long they have been holding. But I've had people tell me that have had 10 years of therapy, Brittany, your 2 sessions with me changed my life more than 10 years of going to pay a therapist. And that's not to call out a talk therapist, but it's because mindset work is not enough. Even mindset coaches are learning this now and are telling, people like me, oh my gosh, I need you to teach me how to teach my clients how to do breath work and get into their body and do somatic work to release what they're holding, because the mind is just too much. Our minds are very powerful. And like we said in part 1, they can also be prisons. They can also be very dark and daunting for many of us. And I think, especially because of where we are in the world right now, that is for a lot of people. And so it's important to understand that this is a mind, body, spirit process, and nothing is overnight. However, I do believe you will feel at least better breathing consciously for, a certain amount of time versus not doing it at all. Because even if it's not the thing that helps you, I truly believe it will open you to the next doors that need to give you those tools to actually help you and how you're going to actually move through this. I know for me, since I've done breath work, I've opened up to so many other modalities and started getting training in so many other ways, because it's opened me up. I really believe it opens your soul up and lets you see and connect to who you truly are and your higher self, to be like, oh, wow, there is so much more there out in the quantum field, out in these realms for me. And I can see it now. And now I'm open. And once you become open and curious and have awareness, well, then everything changes. Everything in your life changes because you're open.
As we start to wrap up this fantastic podcast series, again, you've been absolutely crushing this. And I truthfully hope that I can have you back on here again. For those that are tuning in, you guys know that I like to have my special guests on here, and not just once or twice. I like to call it like an audible journey / journal, and sometimes like an audible reality TV show, in the sense that I like to not only share what my life has going on, but also what my special guests have going on. So Ali, I would love to have you back on here. As we have you on here right now, though, and we start to wrap up some of the breath work experience, because I know your kids are probably going to wake up from their nap soon. What are your breath work recommendations for someone going through extreme grief or trauma like I currently am? And please give us any other information on the topic that you wish. And then also, how can people contact you personally regarding breath work if they would like to have you facilitate it?
I would say a few different ones. So, I mean, if you want, we can just do a very quick, 2 minutes just to kind of walk you through what a simple one might look like and feel like. If you like, here, no pressure, just for you and your audience. And then obviously I can also speak to some different exercises as well. One of them would be just really deep holds in the nose and then breathing out your mouth, kind of like an O, piercing your lips to really release, and then different holds throughout that. Also, 4-7-8 is a big one that I teach because there's a rhythm in the breath that helps you to release anxiety. I have that on my app, and let go of what you're holding, whether you're consciously holding it or not. That's the beauty of breath work, because so many things we do are in the mind. Oh, I got to let it go. Oh, I got to write this down. There is none of that. In breathing, you're just breathing and you're trusting and knowing, or at least getting curious, that the body is doing it for you. The body is moving it out, because that is how I truly believe we are divinely made. We are meant to heal. We are meant to be able to regenerate. Our cells do it, turn over every 7 days. I really believe that when you give your body the tools, this sacred vessel of ours, this instrument, is able to move you through and help you heal. And I mean, I saw that with me. By the way, I know I spoke to the inflammation and all the things I went through, during that time with my body. When I started doing all this breathing, all these different tools, all of that went away. And I had been going to get all these crazy drainages and doing all these ridiculous, not surgeries, but different, whatever, extensive work at all these places, thinking oh, this is going to heal me, it's going to help me. And none of it did. And then it was oh wait, breath work does this. It's there's so many things you don't even realize that your body can do on such a simple level when you give it the tools to just come back to homeostasis, retraining and that regulating, because once the body feels safe, everything can shift.
For those of you guys that are tuning in, please feel free to reach out to Ali. I know tenfold that she can help you out with your trauma, learning how to calm your mind, reset, rewire your brain and your thoughts. And I'm not just saying this, it's not woo-woo, it's not fake. I've been doing meditation, reading, taking supplements, sitting out in the sun, grounding way before I even lost my son. So I am very grateful to connect with somebody like Ali, who might not only be able to facilitate my healing journey a little bit better, but also maybe tap into some of you that have been listening into her podcast series with me. How can people contact you directly? Do you have a website? I know you have social media. Where would people reach out to you if they would like to be mentored essentially by you?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to work with any of you. If this is pulling on your soul, calling you, please reach out to me. We can have a connection call and chat about what you're going through and what you might need support around and how I can help you. I work in many different ways, whether it be online or in person or needing a few months at a time, container. I also run breathwork challenges and groups. There's a lot of different ways you can work with me. I'm also going to be holding retreats later this year, so stay tuned for that in person, because I know how important it is to have community and heal together. But I have a website, alilevine.com. Best way probably, honestly, to reach out to me is either on social media. If you do have social, at Ali Levine Design, you can message me and give me a follow and say hello and let me know you heard me here on Brittany's podcast. I'd love to know that, and share anything you want me to know. And then in my link in my bio on social media, there is a place that says connect and book a call with me, 15-minute free call. And I would recommend you do that so we connect and chat. And if you're wanting to get started today, you can totally download my app and you'll have me in your pocket, starting to guide you on the journey. As I said, it's called Breathe, and just and the letter B capital on App Store and Google Play. And you can, start there with your journey. But I'd love to help you. I'm here to help others not only just heal, but truly evolve and come back to their soul design of who they are, because I know everyone has that authenticity within them. And when we get into these dark places and we experience these, traumas, we lose that light of ourselves. And as someone who lost the light in me, I feel very called to be the medicine for others, to be the light in them.